All right. Welcome, listeners, to Innovative Events Podcast. We have with us today Michael Hinkle. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome,
All right.
welcome.
I am super excited to have you back. So, we have actually been talking about your book, Treasures versus Hunters. Or, I apologize, Hunters versus Farmers. And within there's treasure. Now, on your book, we have been going over multiple episodes here discussing each chapter. So I'm just going to recap each chapter we've talked about as we are today going to hit the last one. Now, on our first chapter, we talked about hunters versus farmers and what those differences are. Then in episode 2, we talked about treasure hunting basics. Episode 3 was the gatekeepers, and 4 was relationships and sales. And then, as we all know how important relationships are, you even have another episode on that, episode 5, nurturing the relationships. So then we went into 6, which was overcoming objections, and 7, staying on the forefront of your industry, 8, owning your reputation, 9, don't follow the crowd. And now today we're going to be talking about the nuances in sales. So, Mike, I know we've had, over episodes, different people kind of jumping in and out and hearing your story. But as this final one here, I'd love for you to give us a little brief again about you, your experience, some of the things that have been hot topics we've talked about, and then we can dive into nuances in sales.
Certainly. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
My background is I spent some 40 years working for various Fortune 500 companies in the real estate industry in the sales arena. Sales was the furthest thing from my mind as I was growing up, going through college. My degree was in public administration. I was going to be a poli sci guy. So it was a big deviation. So I learned a lot the hard way, but what I learned was that there's no real great science to sales. It's just doing what you say and saying what you mean and following your, being following your sticking to your word, following your own direction in life, and being true to yourself. Um, One of the most important things that I did discover over my time in sales was that relationships became a critical component of it. I sold a product in the real estate industry that was basically there were a lot of other companies doing the same thing, selling the same product, and there was no difference between theirs and mine. A loan is a loan. A title insurance policy is a title insurance policy, and an escrow is an escrow. What I did discover very early in my career was that the key differentiator to all of those companies out there was what I brought to the table. The service, the level of service, the commitment that I would make to their benefit, my dedication towards their success. Those are the things that are going to make you a great salesperson. And if anybody tries to tell you that it's something different, I would ask them to prove it. I'd want to see their paychecks to prove that that's the way it is, because I don't believe anybody does business with someone just because it's gonna make them money. I think they do business with people because, one, how it makes them feel, and two, it solves a problem they have. So today we're going to talk about the part of this process that really relates to you. And when I talk about, when I talk about the stuff that relates to you, I'm talking mostly your money, your choices, why you chose to go to work with such a company, why you chose to do this. And one of the things that I think is a critical component in sales is you got to be true to yourself. I've talked to you about nurturing relationships with your clients. I've talked to you about doing what you say. I've talked about all these positive things, and none of it means anything if the company you work for is not following the same example you're trying to set. If I tell you I'm going to do exactly for you what I say, but your company says we're going to do whatever we want, however we want, whenever we want, we don't really care about the customer, you have a conflicting message. And once you have a conflicting message, your choice has to be, do I want to deal with that message, or do I want to stay true to my message? And I have left many organizations in a very short period of time simply because we were on opposite sides of the fence on those issues. I didn't want my reputation smeared or besmirched by their actions. And believe me, once you get a reputation of being someone that will take shortcuts because the company you work for took shortcuts, that reputation is going to follow you. You can't turn around and say, well, I only did it because I worked at XYZ. No,
Mm,
you did it because you didn't have a moral balance. You didn't have a moral compass set up. And
right,
you were willing to sell your soul for a dollar bill. And
right.
no one wants to work with a salesperson that's going to sell their soul for a dollar bill.
Right. So then, okay, so let's break this down where we're gonna start this from the beginning. This starts with us, right? You mentioned it starts with you. So
Right.
when we're talking about our reputation and who we're gonna be, where for yourself have you started your reputation, and what pointers do you recommend to people for their reputation and how to build that strong and healthy, what that looks like?
I wasn't always necessarily looking for an industry leader, but I was looking for an organization that would stay true to their word, an organization that would back me up when I needed to be backed up with the client, an organization that was more than willing to admit they made a mistake and do whatever they needed to do to rectify it. And honestly, that does take you a couple of weeks of employment to get to an organization before you see that for real. But those are the things you're looking for. If you make a commitment to the client because you were told you can make such a commitment, does the company back it up? Now, let me ask you a question. If
Mhm.
I called you up and said, I'm willing to pay you $1 million to go out and, sabotage somebody else's career,
Mhm.
are you going to turn me down? Or are you going to be the person that says, sure, I'll take $1 million to destroy somebody else's reputation?
Mhm.
Well, if your answer is the second instead of the first, then that's exactly what I'm talking about. You're selling your soul for a dollar bill. You're
Right.
willing to take and destroy somebody else's reputation simply for the mere fact it means monetary reward for you. And I've
Mhm.
never been about that.
Right.
Um, the other thing I discovered really early in my career, keep in mind when you're in sales, you are the one person in the organization that's mostly interested in how much you bring in. Everybody else in the organization, all those people on the inside, they're working for a paycheck, and they're working to be able to take their money home to feed their family and do the things with their family they want to do. They're not worried about how stressed you are. They're not worried about how you need to cut a corner to make a client happy. All they're worried about is they want to stay gainfully employed by doing the right things and making sure that they do that. And
Well, and would you say some of those things too that change the mindset in that is if you're not in sales, many of us will then be on a fixed income, right? It's your hourly. Where sales, you are based off your commissions. You're based off that next person you bring through the door.
exactly. And if you take the stress of knowing that, when I first began my first sales position was 100% commission.
Mm,
I went through a divorce, and those have a tendency to kind of change things around in your mindset. So that job was a monumental fail. I had too much other stuff going on. But the very next position I took was again 100% commission. Well, this time I wasn't going to fail. I spent the first 90 days busting my butt, day in, day out, working 6, 7 days a week, taking no time off.
mm.
And I was highly motivated. I was also moving at 100 miles an hour. And I expected the people inside the office to be matching my speed and my pace. Thank God I had a really smart manager, because
Mm.
as he saw this develop, he took me aside one day and he says, Mike, how much do we pay you? And I said, well, you know that. You pay me based on what I close, yada, yada, yada. He goes, great. And that's kind of a lot of money, isn't it, when you start getting these things closed that you're building up in your pipeline? And I said, yeah. And he says, how much do you think we pay the people that are doing the work for you? Well, I don't know. That's between you and them. And he goes, I agree, but do you think we're paying them as much as you? And I said, no. I go, you can't afford to.
Mm.
And he goes, exactly. So why are you beating them up because they're not seeing the same benefits out of what you're putting in? He goes, you need to start remembering that sales doesn't stop at the door. Sales goes all the way through the process. You're selling this deal to the employees when you bring it in. You're selling it to me when it's a marginal deal and you really want to make this one work. You're looking for ways to help me understand how we need to make this work. So, Mike, your job in sales doesn't end at the door. It doesn't end until the deal's closed.
Mm.
So it really made me stop and step back and take a look at my motivation is not everybody else's motivation. So I had to start coming up with a process where I could deal with all these people and not let my stresses and my agonies become a part of their problem. And it helped me develop a really good line of thought with my clients as well. And the one thing that I say in my book, and I think I've said this many times, my problems can never be anybody else's problems. They're not the client's problems, they're not management's problems, and they're not my fellow employees' problems. They are my problems. I don't get to shove them off on somebody else and expect them to pick up a heavier load because I want to get paid a bigger check.
Right. Now,
Uh,
can you actually give us an example, right? Because this totally hits the nuances. So something that may be affecting you, which is trickling down to your team. How do you recognize that and then fix it?
um, if your conversations ever start with "I need you to," "I want you to," "You have to," um, those are indicators right off the bat that you might be traveling down a road you don't want to go down too far. Um,
Mhm.
unless you are directly responsible for the person you're talking to, you don't need, want, or have to do anything for that person. They're not your boss. You're not
Right.
their boss. You don't get to give them instructions. You're not cutting the paycheck.
Mhm.
Great rule of thumb. If your name's not on the letterhead, don't assume you're the final decision maker.
Fair enough. But then would we approach some of these conversations where, again, it's some team collaboration? So something along the line where, hey, I have this idea. I'd like to go over this with you guys and get your input as well.
It's a great way to start any conversation. You want to start a conversation with someone, get them to work with you. Then
Mhm.
start it with sentences that start exactly like this. Hey, I was thinking if we do this, would this work better? Hey, what are your thoughts on this problem that we're having here? Hey, how can I help you help me? Don't really literally say that way, but that's the thought process you need to go through.
Right.
You need to encourage them to give you suggestions on what they can do to help you get to where you want to go. Don't tell them what they need to do. Get them
Mhm.
to buy into what we need to do as a team to get there. You know?
Agreed. Agreed. I think team is the big word. So many times we all get put into our different positions, and it's like, well, I'm doing my piece, but if Joe Schmo over there would do theirs, everything would work just well, right? So, our communication and the style in which we do that makes all the difference of how well our teams work together. So I apologize where I wanted to jump back on track where I did see there was a wave, a question we may have. So if we can go ahead and get that on the screen, let's see if there was a question we could answer. Okay, so what is the greatest lesson you you ever learned in sales when it comes to your success?
The greatest lesson I ever learned in sales was that not it, it was exactly what we just talked about.
Okay.
My motivation to be successful in sales is strictly just my motivation. I had to quit assuming that other people wanted me to be successful. They
Mm,
they very well may, but it's not their driving force, and it's not the main thing in their world. But they also want themselves to be successful, which I imagine is probably further up on the top of their list than me being successful.
right. Okay, it looks like we may have a follow-up question. Let's see what we have. All right. So, what do you see as your best defense and continuing to build your business while not alienating those you work with?
Being considerate of them, learning more about what makes them work. You know, all of my inside staff that I used to work with, I tried to have as good a relationship with them as I did my clients.
Mm,
I would have 100% of the bank. This was critical. This one piece of advice you should write down if you're thinking about it. Anytime we had a problem with a client that resulted from anything that was done inside of my organization, 100% of the time, it was strictly my responsibility and it was my fault for the incident occurring. I never once pointed the finger at anybody else when something fell apart to the client. My inside staff knew that if they dropped the ball on something, I wasn't going to throw them under the bus. It was not diesel fuel they
mm,
smelled burning in the parking lot because they were getting run over. I took the hit. Now, they also knew that if they set me up for a big hit, they and I, and possibly management, if it was necessary, we're going to have a lengthy conversation about how we avoid doing that a second time. But
Mhm.
they were never publicly flogged.
Okay, no, that's good to hear. And it happens. Sometimes we get in the heat of the moment, or we're put on the spot, and it's the easy thing to do is to blame someone else.
Yep.
Now, some of these ways that we may be alienating people we work with, can you give us some examples of that? And what as leadership and owners, what are we looking for to try and help clean that up?
Um, look, if you follow the language, follow the words. I can't say this enough. I said all the times words matter. Listen to the conversation that's taking place between the two people. If
Mhm.
someone's using aggressive language such as you should, you needed to, you didn't, you don't,
Mhm.
I need, I should, if all of their verbs and adjectives that they're using come out and pointed at a direction other than inward, that's someone that you need to have a conversation with about trying to build a better team relationship with the other people. Now, if I come up to you, Amy, let's say that you and I are working on a project. You're my inside person. Something was supposed to go out last night at 5. It didn't go up. The client just called me up, livid with me at 8 o'clock the next morning and is ripping into me. And
Mhm.
I say, I don't know, and then I turn it into, well, I gave it to Amy. She knew it was important, but she didn't bother to do it. I don't know what she did. Okay. And then I come to you saying, oh, the client's upset with you because you didn't do this. And what's your first instinct? You're going to defend yourself, right?
Right, right. Because again, it's the pointing of the fingers,
Do we,
right? Or
do we,
or
do we
the
have
other.
the slightest chance of resolving the issue for the client if you're pointing your finger at me and I'm pointing it at you?
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. This is just gonna be a group of people angry with each other, and it's
And
everybody else's problem and fault.
And what's the client's response to this?
They want out. They're done. If
They're
they
done.
can't get support from someone, they don't have a cohesive team. Why would they partake in that?
If you can't get your act together to figure out what you guys are doing from day to day, why am I there?
Yes, yes.
And again, I've cited in other chapters of the book. If you're
Mhm.
telling your client, don't use our team because we're not smart enough to work coherently,
Oh my
don't send that message. Don't send that message.
No, that's a horrible one. It definitely does. It's hard internally as a team and for your business to keep things operating that way, right?
Right,
Because as the owner, we have our hands on many things. Are we fully in depth on each step? Definitely not. We're counting on our contractors and on our employees and what they're doing and trusting them.
right.
So now, there comes to these ties where we come to resolve these issues and we run into, is this a personal problem or is this really work related?
Right.
So, can you give me an experience where you have run into those and how you handle something that may hit personal and then maybe not on personal and how you resolve those?
Um, Personal issues are very difficult and tough to work through because they are indeed personal issues. If I'm having, in the same scenario we just used, if with was relying on you to get something out, what I didn't know as to why you didn't get out at 5 o'clock was because at 4:30 your kid's daycare called and said your child just broke her arm. It's inappropriate. It's inappropriate for me to have expected you to do my work that needed to get out by 5 instead of going home and taking care of your daughter or your child. Um,
Mm.
those are things and those are lessons that are hard learned. The first time you blow up and somebody comes back to you and says, "Look, that wasn't done because this happened," you're standing there holding your hat in your hand, going, "Oh, well, I guess call me Simon LeCreed." Um,
Right.
and we're all working for different compensation programs. That's the other thing about sales.
Mm.
Sales, sometimes you work for commissions only. Sometimes you work for commission and salary. Sometimes you work for salary and bonuses. It doesn't matter what you do. Salespeople are money motivated. So keep that money motivation going and make sure it works for you in your life. But realize that's not how everybody else is getting paid. So
Right.
regardless of how you get paid, chances are because you're in sales, you're getting paid more than most of the people you're working with.
Right.
Because let's be honest, every organization needs a sale to come through the door in order to exist. I don't care what it is you do, if you sell widgets or you provide documentation for whatever, until you
Mhm.
find a client to procure that service or a product, there's nothing happens. There is no exchange of value. So the person creating the exchange of value is the salesperson. So salespeople get compensated in many different ways for all the right reasons. I mean, you're bringing in the business. So
Right.
but again, going that particular direction, and I'm chasing down a rabbit hole here, but I can't say this one enough. Make sure that the caliber of the organization you're working with and their ethics and their desire to be in business for a long period of time by doing the job right matches yours, because there's millions of companies out there that need good salespeople, and there aren't a ton of good salespeople. There are a lot of people out there that want to be in sales. There are a
Mm.
lot of people out there that are in sales that should have never been in sales. Don't be that person. Be the one that can go anywhere in the world, pick up any product or service, find a client for it, and get paid by a company because you're doing it that well.
Wow, wow. Yeah, and the funny thing is we run into this in all industries, right? You find a salesperson that really just should not be there. Do you believe that there are salespeople you can teach and train, or do you really think this is more of a characteristic thing and someone that they are the right person for that role?
Um, I think that sales is an acquired skill. You
Okay.
learn it over time with the right mentorship and the right guidance and the right support. I think that a bad salesperson, I don't want to think that you could pick them out in advance, but I have learned over the years that there's certain things that certain people do that indicates that they're not going to be right for this job. For
Mm.
example, if I was to pick out somebody that was totally green, had an inability, had never even thought about being in sales, one of the things I would know they had in their history, in their background, was some kind of position at some time working with the public when the public was at their worst. And I used to love interviewing people that came out of the hospitality industry. And
Mm.
everyone would go, why? And I go, because they are sitting there bringing a plate of eggs out to a person that probably doesn't deserve the effort that they're putting forth. And they're belittling them because the eggs weren't the right temperature. They're yelling at them, they're screaming, they're putting them down because of something going wrong in their day. And
Right.
if you, as a server, can work your way through that without the manager having to come over and kick the guy out of a restaurant or bring in a different waiter or waitress,
Mm-mm.
you are, my friend, are learning how to deal with people and taking them at their worst. Because when people are spending money, they have a tendency to be extremely self-centered about that process. And if you can understand how to get through that process without alienating them or giving them a reason not to use you for their service or buy your product from you, then that is half the battle right there. And all of that comes from learning how to take negative input and create a positive result. And I think that in the hospitality industry, a lot of people at a very young age are taught how to take negative input and create
Mm.
a positive exchange out of it. Now, I'm not saying that's the only way you go. By the way, I have never been in the hospitality business. Um, I
Right?
grew up. I grew up coaching it as a lifeguard. So,
Okay.
mine was a little different. But I
Yeah.
have learned over the years that those people have a really strong propensity towards that. That's what I look for when I'm trying to train somebody or I'm mentoring somebody. Uh,
Mm.
I want to see this openness, this willingness to figure out the right formula.
Okay. And then you know what I love is because you have the book, Hunters versus Farmers, right? So you have these techniques and these skills in which you help businesses learn how to coach and teach their team to be a success in sales. Is that accurate to say?
That's 100% exactly why I wrote the book. I wrote the book not I wrote the book for two reasons. One, I have three kids. It was a great legacy project. Two is I told you that I started my life off coaching swimming and being a lifeguard. I loved coaching. I coached my kids when they were growing up in every sport they did. I enjoy coaching. This is a coaching book. This was written as a book to coach you, to help you be a better you. Nothing in it is a how to. I don't tell you you need to do A, B, C to get X, Y, Z. And anybody that tells you in a sales book that if you follow my formula, it's directly spot on, you'll be successful. Bullshit. Excuse the
Mhm.
French.
Mhm.
Sorry for but that's literally what it is. It's
Right.
BS, because the only person that knows how you operate is you.
Mm.
I was raised a certain way, and I have a certain set of life experiences that make me operate in a certain manner. Amy, my friend, you too have were raised in a certain way with a certain set of life experiences that make you see life in a certain way. And dare I say, they may not be exactly spot on and similar, but
Mhm.
they may not be spot on, but they're very similar in that we both seek to make people successful. We're looking for things that are positive. So could I tell you that if you wanted to match what I did as sales and you did bing, 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 that it would work for you? No, because
Mhm.
one of the reasons I did one of these things was because a million years ago I learned that this was somebody else's reaction to something when I did it wrong. You
Right.
know,
Right.
and
Well, thank you. Because that helps us as other leadership here looking for support. If you're getting someone who says, "I have this specific formula," I might be a little more skeptical. I need you to hear my story, what I'm going through, and what are these steps of actions we can take forward. Because yeah, every industry, every single person operates differently, and that success story is different.
the first thing, if you want to be a leader to someone, the first thing that you need to accept for yourself is the why. Your why is way more important than the results.
Mm.
Why you do something should be more than what happens when you do it. And I'll give you, a great example of that. Why I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I wanted to leave a legacy, and maybe somebody will pick it up someday, read it, and say, this is a great way to run your life. I didn't do it because I wanted to be a best-selling author and make millions of dollars off of it, because those results, quite frankly, haven't happened yet. I'm not basking on this beach because I've got all the money from this book.
No, fair enough, fair enough. And I'm right there with you. I agree. When your heart is in it, no matter what you're doing, your work, your family, yourself, the production that comes out of it is
It's
it's
true.
your own perfection. It
It's
really is.
Yeah. It is true.
So,
It's the true you.
yes,
And
yes,
the
and
only person,
authenticity.
yeah, the only person I'm going
Yeah,
to be successful at is the true Mike. And the only successful version of Amy is the true Amy.
yeah.
And they're not going to be the same.
Agreed. Agreed. And diversity, all of that, it's a beautiful thing. And so, definitely as we wrap up here, because we're coming up on our time, I think we've made some great points, some great tips here that can help people. And I want to redirect everybody back to you and jumping on your website, seeing what you have to offer that can help them in any of their sales strategy processes of their business. Now, also, Mike, you have your book. You have it in Barnes and Noble. You have it in Target. Am I missing anywhere else you have that at right now? Is it in
It's on
Amazon?
it's on Amazon, and it's also available in e-reader.
Perfect, perfect. So I encourage people to jump in and get that book. Take some time, read it. Come catch up with Mike and see if a consult makes sense, right? And do you
Yeah.
have anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I also have another package that's going to be coming out shortly, and I will be getting it out there in the internet. So just if you can tag my site or tag my name, you should be able to come across it. I have a video course that's coming out that corresponds with the book,
Mm,
talking about the same stuff we've been talking, but different stories, similar. and then a study guide that'll accompany that. And the book, the study guide, and the video course will all be priced very affordable for someone that was interested in doing some self training. I'm going to ask you some questions that I think you should need to answer. And one of the things that I was very careful about, and I'm going to say I was very careful about because I wanted to make sure that creativity came across on all venues of this. I try not to repeat any stories. I try not to repeat any concepts unless they're extremely important. And I want to say I did that on purpose, but part of it is because I am in sales, and remembering what I said yesterday may not always come out to be the same. you know,
Fair enough. Well, on an exciting note, this isn't our last one. We are going to connect again on September 4th, 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and we're going to go